We just finished our longest run ever there. A couple of weeks ago, we ran the Wicklow Way, which was 130 kilometers, which we did over 2 days. We ran the Wicklow Way. And we did it in our Vivo barefoot shoes, which people go, wow, you did it in barefoot shoes. And we did, and we had no pain in the soles of our feet at all. And what we found was incredible is that because of the minimal soles, we really felt connected to the landscape because there was so many different landscapes, hills and mountains and rugged terrains and over rivers and brooks and valleys, and just to interact and really, because you got the same amount of nerve endings in the soles of your feet. And we've exclusively been wearing Vivo barefoot shoes for the last decade. As soon as we started wearing them, they really did change our paradigm for what a shoe should be. They have a natural wide toe box, which really encourages your feet to build strength. Studies from the University of Liverpool found that your foot strength improves by up to 60% within only a matter of months, which is absolutely incredible.
And I think one thing to note is that you wouldn't buy clothes that don't fit you or make you hunch over, just make you take on a natural shape. However, many of us buy footwear that forces our feet into these kind of tight, restricted positions where they're kind of just like a cast. They're locked in. By wearing Vivo barefoot shoes, they've got a wide toe box which allows you to spread and allow your feet to be in a natural shape and also to get feedback from the terrain. We couldn't recommend them more. Use the code HP20 to get 20% off at checkout. That's HP20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com.
And my final thing is then that your feet are the foundation of your movement, that, it really all starts with your feet. If your feet are healthy and strong, that directly impacts your ankles, your knees, your hips, your spine. So we found them just to be fantastic for our body and for particularly as we get older, as all of us get older year by year. They're great. Dr. Melanie Joy, it's an absolute pleasure.
It's a joy. It's so good. I'm so happy to be back. And I came back after being here last time. I don't remember how long ago it was, but I think it was
like a year and a half or something.
No, I think
not
it was
that
6
long.
months ago.
Was it?
Because the leaves were turning. I remember the leaves outside. There was a tree outside here that was just
memory.
glorious colors. Well, I took a picture of it.
Yeah,
and I was so enamored of Pearville and the happy Pear that this is the first time in my career I've gone, so many podcast interviews, just been all over the place. And coming here, I was so impressed and so enamored. And I said to my husband, Sebastian, we have to go back. You have to meet these guys. You have to see this community, this amazing work that's being done, this beautiful, beautiful town. And here we are. I'm so happy to be back and talking to you guys.
Beautiful. We're very touched. I'm really touched. Thank you. What a joy.
Yeah, really, really fun. To get under the surface now, to dig under the surface a little more and see if Sebastian likes it as much as you do.
Well, yeah, I've got to find the dark underbelly. No,
the underbelly.
There's got to be. There's got to be something.
There always is, but that's the fun part, and I think that's the grit.
Yeah. Well, the little town of Greystone's won the most livable community in the world, under 20,000 people twice in the last 15 years. So it'll be interesting to see. And sometimes you can't really see on the surface what's, until you live somewhere or spend time somewhere, you can't necessarily see the inner workings of things.
Also, probably once you live in somewhere longer, you possibly leave space to remove the rose-tinted glasses. When you're on holidays, often you can have holiday glasses, which are fabulous. And then I think the key, or one of the keys to a good life, is how you can have those holiday glasses every day.
Totally, and that's gratitude. We
exactly.
do where we live now is my husband and I, Sebastian and I, we live in Berlin, but we literally have the last number house in Berlin, the last number. So the edge of our street is no longer Berlin. And we live in a forest. It's a forested area. It's kind of a village-looking area with cobblestone roads and these beautiful fields and ponds, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And every single day we just express gratitude for the beauty and quiet around us. And I think, what you're talking about, these glasses, these rose-colored glasses, gratitude is so key to maintaining that, and meditation helps too, but just really being able to, when you see what's going on in the world, also, it doesn't take much. I read the New York Times in the morning and I look at what's going on in the world, and then I look out my window and see trees blowing in the breeze, and it feels
There's a bit of dissonance.
Sometimes, and gratitude,
Gratitude is something that can often be seen as this heebie-jeebie or this ephemeral thing, but it's quite rooted in neurology and into many different aspects of science, how beneficial it is to our overall health.
Yeah, totally. They've done it. It's really interesting because there have been a lot of studies done on gratitude, and gratitude meaning that you don't have to just...
That's the bin truck going by if anyone's hearing any sound.
We're grateful that our bins are being emptied.
Very good.
Hearing this like music. But, they've done studies. And what's really interesting is that when, if you really want to like work on improving your well-being, your mood, and I don't mean just in a really superficial way, but really help improve your sense of fundamental well-being, you don't have to be deeply entrenched in gratitude. You can express like once or twice a day, just verbally or in writing, notice and express something that you're grateful for. And if you commit to doing this, it really can. I mean, I do this all the time and it's incredibly helpful for me, but don't trust what I'm saying. I mean, this is what the science says. And if it's hard, open up social media or the New York Times or any newspaper and look at the way that most people and animals in the world are living and under which conditions. And probably, it won't be too hard to find things to be tremendously grateful for.
Yeah, even on that note, it was only this week we were moving boxes around the house, and I found a journal which someone sent to me, and it had like 3 questions you answer in the morning and 3 questions in the evening. And it was all to cultivate gratitude. And it was, what value do you want to kind of espouse today? Like that type of thing. Or, it was very much 3 questions in the morning, 3 questions evening. And it was, what's your most important thing today? What's one thing you're grateful for? It was just 3 questions. And I've done it a couple of days this week. I forgot yesterday or, something happened. But it was actually really good. I've enjoyed doing it. It takes up to 1 minute. Mm-hmm. Could be 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. But it's just that actually consciously writing was... it's very easy to go, oh, that's a nice gratitude journal, woo woo, blah, blah,
We do
blah.
it every night with the kids.
Yeah.
We've done it for years where we got in the habit, I'd say it was 5 years ago, we got in the habit even more, where we say a prayer together in Polish and then all the family, like there's 5, is my wife and our 3 children, and we'd all go round and everyone has to say between 5 and 20 things they're grateful for over the day. And it's lovely. Like originally it started as just something we did, but now it's like you hear the little moments and the things that the kids value and things that you don't realize they value. Like Ned could say, I really enjoyed Magic with Sean today, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize you appreciated that. I really enjoyed going in and doing something with Granny or whatever way. So it's a beautiful moment. That's something that I always really enjoy, and it kind of holds us together as a family as well.
And when you share it, like, you're looking at the world through each other's eyes, right? And so you're seeing, when you see gratitude, it's sometimes it's like why it's nice to have visitors to your hometown, because they're coming in with this sort of fresh, like, they call beginner's mind, as they say in like, Buddhism or Zen, beginner's mind. Try to look at the world with beginner's mind. And you bring people into your community, for instance, or your home, and you've got visitors and they're like, oh my God, look at this. This is so beautiful. And people just get so used to being on autopilot and not noticing what's around us. And that's normal. Like that's just a normal human tendency that we have. It's hedonic adaptation is this tendency to like have your happiness point, like to basically get used to whatever you feel like is positive and good in your life. It becomes normalized and it stops feeling like a good kind of positive quality or thing. But if you trigger yourself to start noticing that can be really helpful. And, and obviously other practices as well. It's not just,
So true. Because even like with the Happy Pear, there's lots of bits of the business, like the cafes and the farms and Pearville and all the various bits. And I only ever walk around it when someone visits and I'm doing a tour. And I'm very rarely in the spread farm. I'm very rarely in the bakery or in the pesto lines and all that. And like, it's only when someone visits that I walk around it and I go, Jesus, loads of bits to this. Wow. Oh my God. How the heck did all this happen? Like, it's like you're kind of, I marvel at it. Whereas exactly as you're saying, the kind of hedonic baseline where you're just normalized and used to it.
Yeah.
And
That's a great
and taking
example.
things for granted. Like for example, I know you're ready to move this on. Like, for example, your hand, we don't typically appreciate unless it's hurt. And then you go, geez, I really miss my hand. My hand was really helpful.
Yeah, when you break it or whatnot.
Simple as things, how we can notice those
even on that, like that, when you mentioned that word hedonic baseline, it made me think of, we had a great conversation with, what was his name? The Harvard happiness professor, Arthur Brooks. And he talked about the 4 false gods of happiness being power, money, fame, and fame, and pleasure. They were the 4 false gods of happiness. And then he talked about the 3 macronutrients of happiness, which were satisfaction, relationships, and I forgot the other one. Purpose. Yeah, those were the 3 macronutrients of happiness. What are your kind of thoughts? Like, that was him trying to come up with a framework for happiness, this absolute nebulous, challenging thing. And that was his kind of baseline foundational things. What are your thoughts on that?
Something I often feel guilty with is plant-based milks, not the milk itself, but the fact that it comes in a Tetra Pak. A Tetra Pak, in case you don't know, it's the packaging that a milk carton comes in. It's cardboard, it has a plastic line, so it's very difficult to recycle. One thing I've often longed for is a machine or something that I can make my own oat milk or
A
plant-based milk.
modern day milk maker.
Cow, a modern day cow.
Modern day cow. And it just so happens that Nama have released a Nama M1, which is their milk maker, which is amazing. I took it on this week and I made it. And I made a litre of oat milk that cost me 10 cents. So in my house, we use 6 litres of oat milk normally in a week. And that costs, on average about €3 per litre. And instead they cost me 10 cents. That's a €17 saving across the week. If you look at across the year, that's a grand saving. Approximately, yeah. And the amazing thing about this Nama milk maker is that you can make cashew nut milk, oat milk, almond milk,
Spelt
rice
milk, quinoa milk.
any type of milk which you want. Like, it's amazing. And you can customize them and be sure of the quality of the ingredients, because very often when I'm buying milks in supermarkets, like plant milks, the ingredients are not, there's often things which I don't know what they are. So it's amazing to literally put in, when I'm making a litre of oat milk, put in literally 30 grams of oats, a litre of water, 2 dates or 3 dates for sweetener, and a pinch of salt, and it's perfect to get a litre of milk.
Does it take long to make?
No, 1 minute 30.
Okay, brilliant. They've new technology that helps called blend and strain, which is really, really cool, really easy to make, beautiful inbuilt display. Like all Nama things, it's very cool.
Yeah. And Nama, they're all about supporting you to eat more plants. They give a 15-year warranty on their milk maker.
How long?
15-year.
Wow.
So they really believe it. They really want you to use it and support it. It is built to last, so it is quality. You get 10% off with the code HappyPear10. So do check it out. It's amazing. Really, I was blown away this weekend.
What's
when
it
I used
called?
at home. The Nama M1 Milk Maker. 10% off with the code HappyPear10 at checkout.
And for anyone who listens to the podcast, also with our code HappyPear10, you'll be able to get 10% off all their incredible juicers too.
Wow, that's a big question and a really good question. I would say, just to start out with, I don't see happiness as the goal. And I wouldn't even talk about, like, when I think about gratitude, I'm not saying, having gratitude makes you quote unquote happy. I mean, it does make you feel more, happy in many ways, but I think the goal is not happiness. Happiness is a state. It's a fleeting state. It's a sense of fulfillment or fundamental well-being is probably a better way to put that, because we are complex beings. And, a lot of times it can be very easy to just strive for happiness and to feel like, oh, if I'm not happy, something's wrong with me. What's wrong? But it's very normal. Like, to be human is to suffer. It's to grieve. It's to feel fear. It's to feel a whole range of emotions. And I think the goal is to be able to sort of move through the human experience with a sense of fundamental well-being and equanimity, so that we're not riding on these waves of emotions. We're not chasing after the high of happiness and feeling like we should always be feeling good. But we're saying, how can I be have equanimity? How can I have this sense of fundamental okayness inside of myself, despite what's going on around me, and be able to sort of bring my truth into this moment? I don't want to get too abstract about it, but
No, I think what you're saying is so much
sounds
more
so spiritual.
It's so much more grounded, because often the pursuit or the chase of happiness is this fleeting, oh my God, I'm so happy. Whereas ultimately, as you said, like, emotions are fleeting and life is, I think I was running yesterday with Mark Davies and we were chatting about it and just talking about how pretty much half, if not over half of your life, you're going to be into the wind and you're going to be into the rain, and there's going to be opposition of some shape or form. And almost like modern day slant on happiness is like, how can we not be into the wind and how can we not experience rain? Whereas I think you're at, how you phrased happiness there, I think is much more beautiful and rooted and grounded in that it's like, life, it's to feel it. It's to feel it all, and it's to be comfortable enough that you can welcome it and feel it all without this attachment and this clingingness, just to allow it just come through you.
Exactly. I mean, this is what Buddhism teaches, right? It teaches that it's, happiness is one of myriad emotions that we have. And, the goal is to not blend with our emotions, to not identify with the emotions, to not value one emotion over another, to not chase after one emotion and cling. It's clinging, as you said, rightly. To not cling to what we perceive as pleasurable and, resist or have this aversion, push away what we see as like unpleasurable and negative, but, rather to be able to understand that these emotions are just like everything. They're arising in consciousness, they're coming and they're going. And how can we, stay self-connected and maintain a sense of internal of equanimity and in the midst of this?
See, that all sounds brilliant. Like that's like, okay, great. Where do I find that program that I can just set running in my mind?
Well, I can
'Cause-
tell you.
Yeah, more than I'm just saying that, like society's, like the kind of cultural narrative which we're all told is not that. It's we need to buy this and then we will experience the good stuff. We need to eat. If we eat this, we will experience this. And there's this constant, like, and it's cultural program that I've bought into. It's just there. All of us have kind of adopted it in the Western culture.
But it's the oxygen that we live in.
100%.
It's
It
the
is.
air.
It's the
the water we're swimming in if we're fish. You know that way.
Yeah, totally.
So what you're saying is a very different way of looking at it. It's like, how can we, regardless of what's going on, regardless of whether we're winning or losing in life, however you want to gauge the game, it's about how you can best accept what life is coming at you and accept the emotional experience which you're having in the moment and meet it with the same way that you would, whether it's good or bad, because thinking is what makes it so.
Yeah, 100%. And when I said I could tell you, what I mean is that there are like great tools out there. They're like actually amazing. There's amazing work being done. Like Sam Harris. I don't know if you're familiar
he's
with
like
Sam Harris's work.
a meditation person.
Yeah, well, he.
Sorry to put him down to one thing, but that's what the context I think I've heard of him.
Yes, and beyond that, so he became famous or known as a thought leader for his work as an atheist, actually, originally. But it turns out he's like a long-term, not only meditator, but a person who is promoting a certain type of meditation, a certain type of practice of developing consciousness, which is probably best described as creating a new operating system for your mind. It's not in the way he describes it, and people who follow this approach to meditation describe it. It's not, meditation isn't just about how can I calm myself down. It's not just about how can I learn to be more accepting of my emotions. How can I actually work to reset the operating system inside of me, create a new operating system for my mind so that this becomes my default, my norm, which is, what you were just describing before, because as you rightly said, we are so deeply conditioned. I mean, first of all, we're born into these biological brains and bodies that are hardwired to, cling to survival and to resist pain and chase pleasure, right? So we're really hardwired for this in a way. And these fear-based reactions and these anger-based reactions, they served a purpose historically. I mean, and they've kept us alive. And they also tend to hijack us. So on top of our hardwiring, we have this deep social conditioning that is basically capitalizing on our hardwiring and our fears and our desire to be a part of something greater than ourselves and trying to sell us, social power and to sell us immortality and to sell us happiness that we're never going to find, through purchases. So, but there are some great resources out there and teachers who have programs that are really designed to help people learn how to reset their mind through meditation, and not just meditation, but through insight practices. Insight meaning understanding the deeper nature of all of this and of existence so that we're less likely to buy into these myths that we've been spoon-fed since we were old enough to be weaned.
Wow. Sam Harris sounds really interesting. I must look into him.
Well, his app, so he has an app called Waking Up. It's based on the book of the same name.
I like the title.
It's great. And the app is designed to walk people through specific types of meditative practices to help them develop a conscious awareness so that you are less likely to be hijacked by the stuff that we're talking about, and more likely to be able to get into this place of greater equanimity. And he interviews a lot of experts, who practice Buddhism and talk about, this is all based on what the Buddha originally taught, and talk about the issue. So that's one I would really, really recommend. But there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant because it's so counterculture to actually, and it's something that I've been making myself more aware of recently. Like even we're 20 years in business this year, and many times we've, like, to use the analogy where we're like, it's like we're uphill, we're into the rain, it's difficult, it's hard yards, and it's kind of it's often seen success is this place you reach, or success is
A destination.
a destination. And even people will say to us, geez, my God, well done, lads. You're doing fabulous, great job. And inside I'm going, Jesus, fucking, that's, excuse my language, but like, I feel like I'm uphill and I'm into the wind, and it's a struggle and it's difficult. But it's like, how can I lean into the acceptance of that? There's seasons of life, and right now it's uphill and it's into the wind, and we'll probably get to the top and it'll be downhill all the way, and the sun might even come out. Woohoo! Like, how can we accept the fleeting nature of life and just accept that life is going to be difficult at times and other times it's not, and that's okay.
Or the narrative, sorry to riff on that, because I don't think there was a question there.
No, it's more a comment than something that I've been
More
trashing around.
the
in my
comment
own
that there's this
awareness.
idea that we're striving to be successful, or we're striving to reach some destination, and when I have €2 million, dollars, yen, whatever it is, and when I'm married, and when I have a kid, and when I have a house, and when in the future, then I will reach this place of nirvana, and all will be well, and I will wake up in good moods, and the sun will always be shining, and I will be slim and happy in my body. And there's this, and it's like, it's a narrative that's unspoken. Like, no one describes it as blatantly, condensed as I had in an ugly fashion. But that's the kind of subtext which I kind of see out there in so much of the subtext of modern life, that we're puppets playing this game. We're all not playing this game. We're not knowingly playing it, but we're almost like we're being led around by just capitalism and the life which we're living. And like, the world nowadays seems quicker and faster, and come on. And we're all literally, as the band had it, slaves to the machine, to in a sense.
Yeah, so totally. I mean, and I think what you're describing is we're just so identified with our roles. We're so identified with our roles, and like, people have different ways of getting their sense of self-worth, right? So if you're a success-oriented person,
like a type 3 in the
like,
Enneagram.
yeah. Like an achievement-oriented person, I mean, the sense is like, I'm only as valuable as I am successful. And many people have bought into this in different ways. Some people will think I'm only as valuable as I am giving and needed by others. We have different ways of getting our self-worth, but on a deeper level, we are, we're beyond type, we're beyond role, we're fundamentally worthy. Like, we all have the same intrinsic worth. And that is sort of part of the process, is like really recognizing that, and really recognizing this illusion of sort of uniqueness of each of us. I remember, like, somebody asked me on an interview once, it was years ago, like, what makes you special? They were talking about my work and like the success of why we love dogs, eat pigs, and wear cows. And, the person said, well, what is it about you that makes you special and able to do this? And I was so struck by that question, because on one hand, all of us want to feel like somehow we're special and unique. And, obviously we're all different, but somehow we're special and unique. And that's why we have the successes that we have. But at the same time, like, the truth is, we're all able to do what we do because of the privileges we've been afforded. The privileges we've basically been born into. We've been born into the world with brains that are wired a certain way, that think a certain way, that can communicate a certain way, and all sorts of other types of privileges.
It's a great way of putting it.
And recognizing that helps you recognize that you're no more worthy than anybody else, but you're also no less worthy than anybody else. And, the other thing that you were talking about, I think it was James, is it Clear or Cleary? He wrote Atomic Habits.
Yeah, James Cleary, yeah.
James Cleary. He said, happiness is something that we always like think is reserved for our future selves.
Yeah.
And it's really true. And Sam Harris talks about this a lot too. Like, there's this deeply ingrained belief that we all have. Not only I'll be happy when, I'm going to be happy when, but of course that moment comes. And we're so wired to be thinking in the future that it's almost impossible for us to really feel that sense of fulfillment in the moment, because we're planning our next future happiness escapade.
Yeah.
Escapade,
The Way to Gold. You said you want to watch that documentary, The Way to Gold, which is, the existential crisis that Olympic gold medalists deal with. Just that they've been waiting for this thing, and then they finally realize, and it's like, well, I'm 25 and I've accomplished what very few people on the planet do. What do I do now? And it's a bit like that there's this, we're so future orientated that it's almost like the perpetual marshmallow test, that we've become so good at putting, instead of eating the marshmallow now, I'm going to eat it in the future, and you never actually eat it. And
Totally.
I think it is a kind of a weight which a lot of us are carrying around.
I was fighting with myself yesterday. You know, there's those lovely moments. We came down. I my two boys with me, and I came down and I met Dave, and there was Sean and Damo for brekkie, and it was like, I think it was Damo said it to me. You're not rushing off to meet. And I was like, I'm making a conscious effort to enjoy these little moments, not the plans and not the things that I have to do. It's these moments that are the real joy in life. But there was a fight in me to sit there and be present and appreciate, like, this is a fleeting moment that is really special.
We're gone way off topic now, but we will get back on topic. But it reminds me of, we met. It was back about 15 years ago. We were doing making juices and smoothies at this tech event, and it was the founders of tech companies, and there was like all sorts of. There was the guy who founded Skype, and it was back. Before tech had really got massive, and we were there by absolute chance. Because we were not techie at all. We were making juices and smoothies because a guy who we knew wanted us to go do it. And there was the guy from Skype, and there was the guy from Twitter, and there was all these kind of
Jack Dorsey.
There was lots of big wig guys, and there was one guy who had started Bebo. He had started Bebo and sold it and done really well and made lots of money.
Michael something,
really good guy.
All nice lad, we had a good laugh chat.
And he was saying, well, the reality is, like, you know, these guys, all the people in this room, like, we're all nerds. And he said, we've all done well. We've all done really well. But the reality is, the next thing we're going to do is start a vegetable shop or start a winery or start a farm. You guys have cut to the chase. You've just got the farm and the vegetable shop already. Like, you know, you don't have the security that we do, but the experience is still the same. It was like, oh yeah, good point. Yeah. That it's like, it's here was these people that were top of their field, and their dream was probably to do something simple and basic and try to enjoy it and
live close to the land, live in harmony, possibly.
Yeah, and these things, I mean, they matter. It's not like what we do doesn't matter and doesn't affect our sense of well-being, right? Like, so you can, there are plenty of people who will say, like, okay, I got out of this profession and I started something else and I felt like a different person. And that, like, it's not like the external world doesn't matter at all. It's also, you know, it's just really important to recognize that external success is what we just, you know, however people define success, like we were saying, it's like, okay, it could be an accomplishment. It could be what you look like. It could be like making a certain amount of money, whatever. It's not going to give you, it will never give you that deep sense of fundamental well-being, which is ultimately what we want. That's the goal, is that sense of fundamental well-being. And we were talking this morning in the sauna, and I said how somebody had said to me when I was younger, youth is wasted on the young. And you said, oh, you know, well, what does that look like? And I was actually thinking, as we were talking just now, one of the ways it's wasted on the young is that, or what you don't realize when you're younger, is this truth that all of the things that you believe are going to give you that sense of fundamental well-being probably will not. They might make it easier for you to do the practices that help you deepen your sense of equanimity, but they probably will not. And it takes a lot of trial and error to figure that out. It's like relationships. Like, you keep thinking, oh, if only I met the 100% perfect partner, then I would be happy in my relationship and it would be easy. There's no such thing as a partner who's checking every single box perfectly. But when you're 16 and you're starting dating, you don't know that. And when you're in your early 20s, you don't know that either. But once you've had a relationship for a while, you're like, everybody's got their shit. You know, everybody's got their baggage, and we can make a good relationship work when we've got the basic substance. And it's sort of like, I can say in my life, I was telling you, I'm going to be 58 in September.
You look remarkable.
But wow. Thank you. And I was like thinking to myself, wow, even at this age, like, I can say everything I've done, like, okay, I wrote Why We Love Dogs. I wrote the book before Why We Love Dogs, my first book. Like, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to have this incredible, I imagined myself getting that book published, my first book published. And like, what a great sense of satisfaction I'll have. And I'll be able to just relax and take some time off. Immediately, I was on to the next thing. And I wrote Why We Love Dogs, and Why We Love Dogs was, quite a success. And I was like, this is great. On to the next thing. And then I founded Beyond Carnism. And then Why We Love Dogs is coming out in different languages. And then there were like 6 other books after that, and it was just, or however many books, I don't know, like 5 maybe. Anyway.
Good for you.
Thanks. Whatever. But it was one thing after another. And every single time last year, I've only had 2 items on my bucket list for the past 20 years, right? And last year I accomplished one of them. I wrote an album of songs, or produced an album of songs. And I was
And were you
like,
singing?
not here.
Okay, no.
But my bucket list, that was on my bucket list. And it was like, okay, I had 30 years in the making. Like I had put music aside for 30 years, my not finished album of song for 30 years. I finally rallied and did it and produced them. And it was a great feeling. And guess what? I was like, okay, I'm glad I did this. It wasn't like there was a
earth-shattering.
letdown, but in my mind, I was on to the next thing. And I went right back to my hedonic set point or baseline, and I know better, and I know better. If I had been in my 20s, I would have been like really, because like when you're younger, it's a huge letdown because you really believe this illusion of once I get accomplished, do X, Y, or Z,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I meet that partner, when I get that job, when I have
When
that
I,
money,
when I
go on
have
that,
my own house, then I'll be secure.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that like you go on holidays and then your mind is kind of already kind of going, oh, we should do more of this. Where can we go again? Where can we go to the next thing? And
Or when I get home and I'm in my own shower in my own bed, I'll be sleeping better or whatever. And I don't want to knock that, like, there are life changes that really do make a big difference, and studies have shown this too. Like when you do need your basic needs met, right? So if you're living in a situation or you're in a relationship that's really not good for you and not the right relationship, then changing that is going to make a difference in your life. It's just that there's something deeper that has to be a part of the equation.
wow. Are there any practicals for anyone listening in terms of this? Because they've been very ethereal.
Yeah.
And they're really important. This is like my favorite type of conversation.
This is one of my favorite topics. So, but are there any actual tangible things for people? So we've got
Or
that
even
Wake
that
Up
you
app,
practice on
that
a
Wake
date.
Up app by Sam Harris. You mentioned that. That sounded
Waking
like a
Up.
good place, and it sounded like a nice place, which I'll check out myself for his book.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend Waking Up by Sam Harris, that app. And in it, so meditation is important and not everybody meditates, and I understand that, but you can, in the app, it like will guide you. You start with 10-minute meditations and they're guided meditations because we do need, without meditation, it is hard to, I don't even want to use the word achieve, what we've been talking about. But it is hard to find that deeper sense of fundamental well-being because one of the things that meditation does, a really important thing that meditation does, is it helps you become familiar with your own mind. And, Sam Harris says that most of us, like, our mind we've got a maniac in our ear all the time. There's a maniac. It's unbridled thoughts. We don't even recognize thoughts as thoughts. And yet our thoughts define our reality for us. Like, so one thing, listeners can do is even just like make a habit of pausing. You can set your alarm to go off and pause just a few times during the day, once, twice, 3, 4, or 5 times during the day. Pause and just notice, like just look. Listen to your internal dialogue. Notice that there is a voice in your head that is always talking to you, always talking to you. And most people don't even notice it as a voice that's talking to them. It's just reality. And most of us do not communicate with ourselves in a way that's healthy or compassionate. Most of us communicate with ourselves in a way we would never tolerate from other people, ever. And they've done studies on this too. And the way that we talk to ourselves has a profound impact on how we think about ourselves, our sense of self-worth, our mood. Again, I don't want to be individualistic about this because we are relational beings. And I want to sort of avoid this idea of like, we're islands unto ourselves. And it's just think yourself happy and figure out how to change your brain. At the same time, becoming familiar with your mind, your mind, as Sam Harris says, like it's the most important thing that you can do for yourself, for your relationship, and for this world that you are always contributing to, for better or worse, is to heal your mind. When your mind is healthy, you move through the world in a fundamentally different way. And it's impossible to have a healthy mind if you don't even recognize the way the mind is operating in the first place. So pause and just start to notice your thinking and notice your thoughts, as opposed to blending with those thoughts. And, so you, for example, you're walking down the street and suddenly you have a thought about like, oh my God, I have to have this meeting, in 2 days and I haven't prepared enough for it. And what am I going to say? Oh my God, I bet this person's going to judge me, and there it is. You've missed what you're walking past in the street. You've missed the reality that you're this living being, walking, especially if you're here in beauty, incredible beauty, the people smiling at you, whatever else it might be. And you're just completely lost in this abstract reality, which is your thoughts. But meditating, learning to meditate, helps you unblend from your thoughts so that they have less power over you, and ultimately, hopefully, very, very little power over you. And so that's a practical tip that I would give.
Good one. Yeah, it's a good one. And what you were saying there made me kind of think of, you said there about our minds, like most of us aren't masters of our mind. I don't know if that's correct in any sense, but the current way that our minds are leading us, like we're being led by our minds. And that kind of leads me into the topic which we kind of talked about earlier, which was the idea that the world nowadays, like me and Steve are very optimistic people. It's kind of our nature. It's how we came into this world. And I look at the world nowadays at large. Like I don't read papers. I don't have a TV. I don't look at social media. So like I really try to cut myself off from the kind of fear-based narrative, which is generally mass media. But yet my own feeling of the world is like, oh my God, we're in this blockbuster movie. It's reaching the crescendo. And I feel like it's slipping away from us. This like you're kind of going like, and I'm a very optimistic person, but I kind of
However,
I feel like we're at the stage where you're kind of going, wow, if I was a betting person, like it would be, if you're looking at the pure data, you'd go, I don't know if humans will be alive in 100 years time. I don't know if we'll be able to reproduce again in 100 years time, just because like, I'd love to kind of go, oh, I think we will have created a utopia in 50 years where the path is happening. The path is upon. It's so obvious to see. We're all waking up and becoming more loving and caring. But you kind of see my own experiences that, and maybe I'm just projecting this from my own crazy mind. But my own sense is that the world at large seems to be unraveling at a pace that I haven't been aware of in my life. Yeah, there's a huge opener there now. There's there's pretty much it all at you.
Well, you said it really well. And I think what you're expressing really echoes the general tone and timbre of the world. I mean, at least this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm seeing, in what I'm reading online, but it's also what I'm hearing. And, just traveling around the world, talking to lots of different people. If you put your finger on the pulse, the psycho-emotional pulse of most people in the world today, there is a lot of existential angst and worry. Are we going to make it? We're in a race against time. And there is good reason for this. It's not just because mainstream media and social media feeds on very dysfunctional algorithms. That is true. They do feed on dysfunctional algorithms. Like we know that fear gets more likes and more clicks, or more clicks, I should say. Anger and contempt, moral outrage get more traffic and more likes for sure, and shares. So that is true. And when you look at the data, there is a tremendous amount of suffering in the world today. There has been historically, but there's a tremendous amount of suffering, non-human animal suffering. The climate crisis is not going away. We've got more and more people who are like, populist leaders, rising to power. So this is all true. And I think the question is, a lot of people have different ideas about why this is happening. I think that's a different conversation. The question is, how can we, especially people, I mean, all of us, but especially those of us who already care so much about the world and are so committed to healing this world. Like we're all in this room because we're committed to bringing healing to a world very much in need, right? So we can keep the focus there. How can we maintain, again, a sense of equanimity and a sense of groundedness with the knowledge that we might not make it as a species? Maybe that's, that might not be the worst thing for the planet if you think about it. In terms of just suffering at, like, if we think about non-human suffering, and environmental suffering. But how can we move through this in a way that, so not lose our minds? Like, how can we stay sane and take care of ourselves? And the more we can take care of ourselves, our minds and our hearts, the more we take care of our relationships, the healthier our relationships will be and the healthier our movements will be, right? So we talked earlier about using the word vegan, and I'll use that word now. There are people who they don't like that word and say, like, let's talk about plant-based because it's not so ideological and charged. It's also true that the term vegan does refer to an ideology, a belief system, and a movement that's built around this. And it's an important movement of people who are really working toward justice for animals and to change the way that we relate to animals. And if we don't take care of ourselves, our movement is not going to be healthy and it's going to implode. There's a lot of infighting in this movement. And so how I think the question that might be interesting to explore is, how do we take care of ourselves knowing what we know about the state of the world and create healthier selves and healthier relationships and healthier groups, organizations, and cultures that are working to change the world for the better.
Yes.
Well,
Right?
I think it's exactly as you said. Like, it's probably each one of us has to take responsibility at an individual level, and it's a bit like the stone falling into the water and the ripples coming out and having a positive influence. I think that's the only way I can resolve it. Because if I spend time looking out and worried about the future, or worried about what's the world going to be like for my children, or, you know, that type of thing, it just creates more anxiety and more fear. Whereas I find, if, exactly as you were saying earlier, if I can focus more on the challenge, and I'd say it's the challenge of being present and being equanimous and being loving and accepting, rather than amidst the cultural narrative and the programming which I've adopted, just like everyone else, of success and achievement and future orientation and cog in the machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and we can do this we can build this like internal equanimity. It's not something you have to go into a cave and meditate for 30 years, you know, to do. In fact, it's probably better in some ways, at least for most of the people who are listening, to do this as part of your community, in community. Like, we heal, the author Ernie Larson said, we get sick in the company of others and we heal in the company of others, meaning the things that cause us to, you know, become psychologically fractured and dysfunctionally, you know, behaviorally dysfunctional happen in relationship early in life or throughout our lives in various ways. And we heal through relationships. You know, there's this, I've said this before, I think, talking to you guys, you know, there's this belief that you have to love yourself before you can love others. And I think that's one of those things that was like it sounded very pithy and clever when somebody said it. And so it caught on, but I don't think anybody ever really questioned whether that made sense or that's true. Like, why? You know, that's like saying you have to learn to tie your own shoes before you can tie somebody else's shoes. Like, a lot of us learn to love ourselves through loving and being loved by others. Like, many people will say, I never loved myself until I had a baby, you know, or until I found this relationship and I learned, or a companion animal, or, you know, a loving relationship. And then I experienced what it felt like to be loved. I saw myself through somebody else's eyes and I saw the way they treated me. And I wanted to practice love because I cared about them. And then I learned how to love myself that way. So in terms of what you're saying, yes, we absolutely have to take care of ourselves and commit to being as healthy as possible. And we can learn how to do this in relationship. We don't have to isolate, you know, and do this on our own.
Yeah, what does it, like, you use that term that we're all in, like, that life is relational. Like, it's not, we're not these binary, isolated humans that have our own independent emotions, that everything in life is a product of our environment and the quality of our relationships. I wonder, could we explore that? Because my wife was the one that's always at me that, like, that life is relational and that it's not, like, it's the company you surround yourself with, and that happiness, anxiety, fear, these are all contagious, as is, you know, we live in this theoretically we're separate little beings in this, but ultimately we're all intrinsically linked. Maybe I'm going way big.
Yeah, totally. No, it's
idea.
great. It's great what you're saying. And it's actually a really good example, like, just to see we are relational beings. Like, if you think about how you feel think about, like, for example, a relationship in your life that's a really good relationship. You would say a great relationship. I mean, just try to have, and, you know, for anybody listening.
Pretty good, yeah.
So you think a great relationship.
I think we're pretty good.
Okay, we're pretty good. Okay, there we are. I'm thinking of a relationship. I'm thinking of Dave. Dave, who are you thinking of?
Of course, I was thinking of you.
Yes!
So think about how you feel about yourself in that relationship. How do you feel about yourself?
Secure.
Yeah, so you feel secure. You probably feel connected.
Yeah.
Right? How do you feel about you? Is it easy for you to be your better self?
Yeah.
You think about a relationship in your life that's not a great relationship. Like that's a relationship that's difficult. And it might even be with somebody you've never met before. Maybe it's even an online troll, somebody who like keeps popping up, or don't have to say names or anything like that. But just think about a relationship that's a difficult, and I don't just mean a difficult relationship with somebody that you love deeply that you struggle in, but a relationship that you don't feel like is actually a very healthy relationship. Right? A relationship that's a struggle. Can you picture that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Think of it as a fairly unhealthy relationship. So how do you feel in that relationship? How secure do you feel?
Not. Jeez, you feel
On edge.
On edge. How connected do you feel?
small, disconnected, a bit kind of self-conscious and kind of like, oh, you know, you want to curl up a little bit.
And how easy is
Vulnerable.
it for you? How easy is it for you to be your better? I mean, how easy is it for you to be your better self?
Oh, seldom.
It's harder because you,
Yeah.
you need to trust somebody to feel vulnerable around them, to open up, to be your better self. You know, when you're in a relationship with somebody that's not a healthy relationship, generally what happens is you shrink yourself in some way. Like you basically withdraw, you know, and put up your armor, you know, or you attack in self-defense, but you become more defensive. You become more afraid
Closed.
and become more closed off. So when we think about us being relational beings, you know, who we are changes based on who we're in relationship with.
Very good point.
Right. And so this is how we are relational beings. And, you know, I was talking about how you feel on the receiving end in a relationship, but we're creating this in our relationships as well. Right. So when we practice healthy relating, you know, and we can talk about that in a minute, but when we can be healthy in relationship, we increase the chances that the other person who we're relating with, or people, it could be within a broader community, right? That they feel more secure with us, they feel more connected with us, they feel more open. It helps them to be their better selves. And
This
does
sounds
that make
like
sense?
a very important piece to the puzzle, you know, in terms of building a better world.
It's very important piece of helping build a better world, because we're always there's this Buddhist saying that I love. You know, we all have within us the seeds of greed, hatred, and desire, and we also have within us the seeds of love, compassion, and empathy. And our job is just to water the right seeds. So we're always watering seeds in ourselves, but we're also watering seeds in others as well.
It's a great expression. Will you say that one again? We have the seeds of
We all have
greed
within
and-
us the seeds of greed, hatred, and desire. And we also have within us the seeds of love, compassion, and empathy. And our job is just to water the right seeds. Or as this author I mentioned before, who works in writes about addiction and recovery, which is very closely connected with everything we're talking about. What you focus on grows. What we focus on grows in ourselves or also in others. So coming back to what you had raised before, which I think is such an important point, how, you know, given the dysfunction that we've been born into and that we've inherited, and that's getting increasingly dysfunctional, that we're in the midst of an increasingly deeply dysfunctional world. It's a world that does not understand how to relate in a way that's healthy in many ways. How do we bring function to this? How do we bring love and health into this? And we do this by committing to the health of our own minds and our own selves. And this is through, you know, what I was talking about with Sam Harris, and also learning. There are a lot of techniques, like practical techniques we can learn. We can
Making
talk
peace
about if
with
you
our own
want.
minds.
Yeah, we can talk about this of how to create like less reactivity in ourselves. And we commit to practicing healthy relational dynamics. And the two go hand in hand. And this creates healthier communities, which then create healthier movements for change, which help create a healthier world. I mentioned to you guys earlier that some of the work I've been doing is to help reduce infighting among vegans and advocates for all different progressive causes.
And infighting, it seems like it's for like where they're human, there's politics, and ultimately like a business could be seen as an organized. In essence, it's a group of human organized around a single goal. So it's like this
Exactly.
relates to every aspect. It could be a family, it could be a football team, it could be
Actually.
a business organization, it could be a vegan movement, it could be an anti-vegan movement. It's humans. Ultimately, what you're talking about is the root
Exactly.
of all
Collections.
collaboration.
Exactly. What you're describing is systems.
Yeah.
That's it. Systems. Right. And so, you know, the smallest system is like an individual, right?
Yeah.
But internally, our internal system, right? Because we're always relating to ourselves. So just thinking about what we were talking about before, about that voice in your head, you have your internal system. It's actually more complex than that, but that's a whole other conversation, which is really fascinating. But
and ultimately, even if you think about your own system, like an autoimmune disease is when your system is fighting with yourself.
right,
So it's like
exactly.
it's like an organization where there's infighting. It's the same thing that's happening with yourself.
Exactly.
It's an extreme example of infighting.
Totally. I mean, it's a perfect example, right? So you have your own internal system, but then you have, your system is your relationship. That's a dyadic system, a system of two, you and your partner or any partner, you two, you have a dyadic system. And then you just broaden it from there. Like a company is a system, an organization is a system, a movement is a system. Our world is a broad system. So, and systems are made up, these systems that we're talking about, they're made up of individuals, and they're only as healthy as the individuals that make them up. And when we learn how to relate in a way that's healthy, we increase the chances that we're watering the right seeds in that system and inviting others in that system to be their better selves, essentially.
What's that communication we did? It was non-something.
Non-violent communication.
Non-violent
NVC.
communication. I remember we did that, which was a kind of, our brother Dara got really into it, and we did some workshops in it, which was all about, being like training and becoming better at communicating and better at interrelating,
And communicating
which was
without
really
judgment.
which was really good.
Like
I
it
remember
sounds
was really,
like the title sounds quite frightening, non-violent communication with the word violent, and it sounds very loaded, but ultimately it was like how to communicate without judgment and blame, and it's how to express yourself.
I'm
and
sure
your own
you know
feelings.
all about it much more than we do.
Yeah, but it's a perfect example, actually, because, and I'm really glad you raised it, because communication is the primary way we relate. We're talking about relating in a way that's healthy, and to ourselves and to others, the primary way we relate is through communication, whether it's through our self-talk, or through talking to others or posting online, non-verbal communication as well. So the more we learn how to communicate in a way that's healthy, the healthier our relationships are going to be, our interactions and our relationships are going to be, and a relationship is just a series of interactions. Every interaction is an opportunity to water the seeds of, one thing or another, within ourselves and, with others. And so one of the great things, the beautiful things about learning effective communication, which is based on nonviolent communication, slight modification, but effective communication is what I would call it, is that trains your brain to think in a way that is relationally healthy. You cannot communicate effectively when you're not thinking in a way that's relationally healthy. So for example, you pointed out that you learn through, you were saying nonviolent communication is the same with effective communication, not to communicate judgment and blame, right? It doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable at all. It simply means that when we're communicating with people about a difference or a problem that was caused, we're doing it in a way that honors their dignity. That says, for example, like, I get, okay, you did something and I found that hurtful, right? You made a choice, you engaged in a behavior that I was hurt by, ultimately. My feelings were hurt, something, and maybe you did something that wasn't even ethical or whatever. If I'm communicating with you in a healthy way about that, I'm not saying, oh, you stupid asshole, how could you? Oops, I'm on the air.
No,
but what I'm saying is I'm saying, okay, I'm sharing my observations about what happened, right? Here's what you did, such and such. You wrote this post about me online where you called me X, Y, or Z, said something negative about me, right? I'm stating the objective truth of what happened. You'll agree with that because that's the problem, right? And then the next thing I can do is to share my thoughts, my perceptions of that, right? And so I actually interpret that to mean that you're, you don't, that you feel judgmental towards me and that you don't care about my feelings and that you're disrespecting me. Simply by communicating that these are my interpretations of what you did makes you less defensive when you hear what I'm saying. Right? A better example might be, I like this example. Like, let's say you and your partner have an argument in the morning and like you live together. So you live with your partner, you have an argument in the morning, you kind of quasi make up, you go your separate ways, you come home at the end of the day and your partner is not saying anything to you.
Very
Sounds
common.
familiar.
That's very
Never
common.
happened, right? Never happened.
no.
So what
I know
is
that
your
space very well.
So what's your assumption about, like, what are you thinking in your mind? So your partner has not said anything to you. It's the end of the day. You've been around each other
There's a
for
famous
half an hour.
Disney
Probability
song
is-
that keeps going off in my head. Let it go, let it go, let it go. I
The
can't
probability is that the forgiveness hasn't happened, or on whichever side it is, that there's someone's holding on to
sing.
something.
Someone's holding on
there's
to something.
An emotion that I regularly experience is resentment.
Okay, so resentment. So
But there's judgment in that by you saying that you're judging the person who's holding.
No,
the
but it's
resentment.
just what I feel, the feeling of myself. And maybe I'm using the incorrect word, but I often have
Probably.
this feeling inside myself, which is a feeling of what's the word? It's something that doesn't feel terribly nice.
Well, resentment is a form of anger, right? Resentment is anger it's usually like a lower grade anger. Well, it can be strong, but resentment is generally used to describe anger, or means anger that has been building up over time. So it's a series of events that have
Like a
caused
passive
anger, right?
almost.
It's not a passive feeling, but it's anger that's built up over time. And anger is a response. It's the emotional response to unfairness or injustice, right? So if somebody feels that something hasn't been fair, I talked to you and you didn't respond in a way that was empathic or whatever, that's not fair to me. It's not treating me the way that I would treat you if I were, or want to be treated, essentially. It builds up over time. So let's come back to that, because it's actually a good point, and a lot of people feel this way. And in terms of infighting, like what we've been talking about, there's a lot of
infighting,
feelings.
which is kind of amongst communities or groups. There's inward fighting, people
families.
fighting.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. I was just
well, it can be
clarifying
within families, but thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's like fighting within a particular group. So when we're talking about a company or an organization or a movement that is designed to create a better world, and people within these systems are angry at each other and are not communicating effectively with each other, and resentment is building up, it ends up really weakening the impact of them and lessening their ability to do what they can do. I mean, there's been studies on this, and they found that teams are 40% less effective when there are dysfunctional behaviors in them. And often these dysfunctional behaviors, they're not relational behaviors. So back to the example I was using, the typical response at the end of the day would be to say, "Why are you ignoring me? Like, you've been ignoring
what's
me all
wrong with
night.
you?
What's wrong with you? You've been ignoring me all night."
Spit
right?
it out. What are you holding on
Come
to?
on, I can feel it. Would you just tell me? Yeah, that'll be yeah.
Right.
And finally, it's just because.
Now, if you say to somebody, "Why are you ignoring me?" or "You've been ignoring me," what do they typically respond?
Oh, it's like, no, I haven't.
Right? So usually if you say to somebody, "You're ignoring me," their response is, "No, I'm not." And that's because ignoring is a subjective experience. It's not an objective observation, right? With effective communication, you start with something objective, something that you've observed that you can both agree on. So if you were to say instead, "You haven't said anything to me since we've been home," then that will create less resistance than, "Why are you ignoring me?" or "You've been
Or
ignoring
even
me."
if it was articulated as an I feel ignored.
But ignored
even
is,
Or I
even
feel
that is
unseen.
trigger. Yeah, but even that can be triggering, because ignoring means intentionally not paying attention to somebody. And you can't be in somebody's mind and know what their intentions are.
It's a very good point.
You know what I
But
mean?
could you
It's-
say I feel unseen? I felt unseen.
Well, that comes next when
Okay.
you talk about feelings. So the first thing you talk about is your concrete
Objective
observation.
reality.
It's objective.
That
we
water's
haven't
grey.
talked. We haven't talked. You haven't said anything to me since you've been home. I can't help but wonder if this is because you're still mad at me, or I interpret this to mean that maybe you're still mad at me. I'm making up a story,
Good
a story
communication.
about
Even as you
this.
say that
Like,
now,
Making
like,
up a
oh, very
story
good.
that this. That's already going saying I'm making up a story.
I'm making up
that-
a story about this. I do this all the time. Like if Sebastian and I have an argument or whatever, a disagreement, I'll say that because as soon as you say I'm making up a story, this is what I'm interpreting it to mean, you're staying on your side of the street. You're not making yourself the expert on the other person's experience. As soon as you make yourself the expert on somebody else's experience, it's called defining their reality.
This is juicy. This is great.
It's like saying, "I know what's happening inside of you. You're ignoring me. I know your motivations."
You're wrong, I'm right. I'm better than you.
That kind of is what
Undignified.
ends up happening. And people get really defensive. The minute you act like you're the expert on somebody else's experience, saying to somebody, you're overreacting, you shouldn't be feeling that way, making their internal experience wrong.
Don't
Your
tell
night's
me
going to
that.
be crap.
Done.
Yeah, the next 24 hours are a write-off.
Game over.
Yeah.
But there's an easy way around this, and it's a respectful way around
Oh
this.
yes, please tell us that, please.
You stay on your side of the street, and you start with an observation, and you say, this is what happened. And you know what? I'm making up a story about this.
That
Maybe
making
it's
up a
wrong.
storyline is brilliant because it really implies that this is quite possibly wrong, but there could be fragments of truth in it.
That's right. But you're owning your perceptions. And then you can talk, and you don't even have to do it in this order exactly, but you can. Then you talk about your feelings, and then you can say, like, okay, I'm feeling nervous. Like, I'm worried about saying something wrong because I made up this story that you're still mad at me. And, I don't know if that's true. I made up this story that you're ignoring me because you're still mad at me. And honestly, I feel nervous. Like, I don't want to make things worse, and I'm not really sure what to say.
That's brilliant.
So then you're owning it, right? And then you can go on to talk about what you need in order to feel better. You could say, like, I really need to kind of talk this out openly, or whatever it may be. You can also lead in with the feelings, right? You can say, I'm feeling a little bit nervous right now. I just I'm making up a story. You haven't talked to me since we got home. And in my mind, I'm making up a story that you're still mad at me. And so I'd really appreciate being able to talk about this. Like, just
Sounds
knowing
safe.
the difference between what's objective truth that you've observed, I've observed these behaviors, and what is your story can offset so many arguments because you're taking responsibility for your perceptions.
Very good. Yeah, I really like that. That
Well, I
sounds
like
like
it.
the
Initially-
challenge is being able to remember those things. You need it written on the kitchen,
You need it written
above
on
the
your
kitchen
eyelids. You
sink.
need it written on your eyelids.
So the inside of the eyelids.
Not all the time, like, because you don't need it all the
But
time.
like regularly when you're approaching like possibly a somewhat fractured interaction, like my thing would be, okay, now I got to approach this based on my own feelings so that I'm not putting judgments. So it's like,
But
I
then-
feel, and then I'm
I
like,
feel like
I'm
you
like-
are being an
I feel like I
asshole.
think you're wrong. And my wife would go, that's not a feeling. And I go, shit.
I feel the feeling like you're being an asshole. I can
Feel like
imagine
you're a
that's what
jerk.
you could have said.
I need
feel
you to
like
stop
you're a
being a
jerk.
jerk.
That would go down well.
No, but a friend said to me a few years ago, which I've definitely applied multiple times and probably forgot about it multiple
feel
times.
like you're a
as
jerk,
well.
that one.
No, it's like express your needs and your wants. Like, as in express, like in that situation, say, I don't feel close to you and I'd really like to feel close to you. Could we talk more about it? Like, because that's my want. Like, I really want to feel close to you. I want to feel safe. And expressing that
Yeah.
can be much more effective than going, why aren't you talking to me?
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
that type of
Nice,
thing.
yeah.
Which
It's
the
like
needs and wants
well,
is
you
a
can
good
see
way
a
to
little
go.
child
What
when
do
you say, "I
you
wanna feel
want?
close to you."
What
That's
do you want?
nice.
I want to have a really big hug and I want to feel safe. Can we lie on the couch and just hold one another for a couple of minutes and then have a
I see where
conversation?
that's going, Dave.
No, but with zero sexual intention, like just purely just to kind of go, I want to feel safe. I want us to connect in a really just simple way.
Yeah, and when you frame it around connection, right, and you really get kind of more clear about your deeper needs, like what's happening right now, and you frame it, connection is a great way to say it because generally these behaviors that are problematic are disconnecting. Like we were talking before about how in healthy relationships you feel, and healthy interactions, you feel secure and connected, and it's a red flag. Right. So if you're in a relationship, whether it's with a colleague, or somebody, an advocate or your partner, and you notice that you're not feeling that connected and you notice you're not feeling that secure, okay, ask yourself, so what's going on? What do I need to feel more connected? What do I need to feel more secure? And this might not have anything to do with your partner. It can be from something you made up in your head. You might remember something that happened between you in the past that hasn't been resolved yet and that brings up like, oh my God, I'm still pissed off about this. Oh, and maybe you need to have a conversation about that. Maybe you just need to let it go. And maybe, you just have to ride out the feelings of connection, of disconnection, because all relationships go through these three phases of connection, disconnection, and reconnection. And very often when people look at their relationships and assess the health of the relationship or the well-being, they look at how connected are we? really what's most important is how you reconnect. You know,
How quick
the
you
way
can
that
repair,
people,
is that it?
yeah, how you repair, and it's sometimes how quickly, but how healthfully. How do you repair? Do you sweep things under the surface and just like wait it out, you know, or do you actually address what's going on and deepen your understanding of each other and yourselves and shift the way that you interact so this is less likely to happen again? I mean, I want to say also that relationships all have their repeat patterns, you know. Most people will say, who've been in any kind of long-term relationship. This could also be a friendship. You usually see this in more intimate relationships. You know, couples tend to have that one, maybe two or three kind of core issue that just keeps resurfacing over and over again. And each time the pattern repeats itself, it's easy to feel despair because it's like, oh shit, here we are again.
No,
I thought
hate
we
these
worked
women.
through this, you know, and if it keeps, if you recognize that it's actually normal for it to repeat, it can be a lot less triggering. People can get really triggered like, well, we haven't worked this out. What does this mean about us? You know, but think of it as sort of like going up a mountain. You know, you kind of circle it, you spiral it, and each time you're a little bit higher. You're a little bit closer to the top if you deal with it skillfully.
Yeah, but
I like
it's,
that. That's
but it's a bit
encouraging.
like it's amazing your approach, because it's a bit like, as we talked at the start of this conversation, about becoming more self-aware and becoming more, you know, aware of your own mind and the master of your mind. And ultimately it'll never be a master. But then in terms of relationship, it's becoming a relationship ninja where you can, you know, you can really work on a symbiotic. It's not about one-upmanship. It's not about being right or being the other person being wrong. It's about how can we connect.
Well, empathy plus
Yeah,
dignity.
connect and reconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. How do we bring, like, you know, to really simplify it? We were talking, you know, about the formula for healthy relating that we've talked about before. To even simplify that further, you know, it's all about honoring the other person's dignity, and your dignity is your sense of inherent worth, right?
Meaning that you're no better, no worse. Than
No better,
anyone.
no worse. Like we are, like, if you really think about it, you know, anybody with a really solid enough understanding of psychology knows that like none of us can be any more or less than the hardwiring biology that we were born with in every single experience we've had throughout our lives. We so often look at people and be like, oh, if I were in that person's shoes, I would have done things differently. Well, you wouldn't have, because you would have been that person. And you would, and people will say like, well, you know, look, this person lived through, you know, this person's a criminal. And yet this person over here lived through horrible abuse and horrible things. And yet they became this paragon of success. And like, you don't know. We are all so different. Maybe this paragon of success had one role model in their life that showed them that life could be different. Maybe their brain was wired in such a way that it was easier for them to keep on striving when the going got tough. I mean, who knows? It's any number of things. But as long as we can really recognize that everybody is doing the best they can with what they've had, what they have. I mean, it doesn't make sense to assume otherwise. If you recognize that, like, you know, every one of us has the same inherent worth. We were born on this planet. We were dealt a deck of cards, a hand of cards. I think a hand of cards. We were dealt a hand of cards, you know, and our life has unfolded. And we stop judging people when we can recognize that. And when we honor people's dignity, that means we see them as inherently worthy and we treat them with compassion and respect. It's those two things. You practice compassion and respect toward the other person. Compassion is simply kindness and caring, and respect is treating them the way that you would want to be treated if you were in that position. And we stop making up these stories of like, well, this person doesn't deserve compassion and respect because they did something bad. They yelled at me. They made me mad. They stole something. They hurt. They killed. Like, this doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable for their actions. We have to, or we would have a completely lawless society, which we kind of have anyway, but still, you know, but it means we do so while honoring their dignity and saying, you're not a lesser being, you know, life dealt you the hand of cards it dealt you. You lived through what you lived through, and you ended up here doing these shitty things, which sucks for you and it sucks for the world. We've got to keep the world safe, but we're not going to look down on you and think that, you know, I mean, if I were born into Hitler's family and mind and body and experiences, instead of being here talking about compassion, I would have been doing horrible things.
Yeah.
It's almost like modern day society, we put too much emphasis on the individual and that we seem to have this perception that we all have this massive agency and autonomy removed from the relational being of life.
Totally. It's very well put. I mean, this is another thing that Sam Harris talks about, and this is like a big can of spinach that I'm about to open up, but we can close it right away.
Can of spinach, okay. I know where we're going here.
It's the vegan version of the can of worms. But a big can of spinach. I mean, the question of free will, how much free will, how much free agency do we really have?
And ultimately, like if we, just to go a little bit bigger again, we're a collection of microorganisms. Like we're more bacteria than we are human.
And what's that got to do with?
Well, just the idea.
It's just
of
very sexy thought.
Yeah. Well, it's beyond it being extremely
Is this
sexy
because
thought.
Melanie said about worms? She didn't want to say about worms, and she said about spinach, and you decided to go into microorganisms and bacteria.
The idea of that we have this perception that we have huge autonomy and agency, and that I, the individual, am defining my own life, whereas I, the individual, is more bacteria than human. And the bacteria massively affect how I feel, how my immune system functions, and how I actually interact with the world.
Yeah, quite true. Yeah,
it is true. And, this is the Waking Up app. Sam Harris has a book. He actually has a book on free will I think it's just called Free Will, and a whole section on free will. It's worth listening to. People can get very triggered by the idea.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine. Yeah.
It can be scary for people to think about. And I think the one takeaway is to just recognize that people are who and how they are because of who they are and where they've come from and what they've lived through. And that gives us permission to stop judging ourselves as well as to stop judging others. And, one of the things I wanted to mention that we can do that's very practical, that can really make a big difference in our experience of our lives and relationships is to learn how to self-regulate. And to really understand dysregulation is a big, and I'll define that. It's a major cause of dysfunctional interactions in groups and within individuals.
What's that for anyone listening who goes, I hear this topic being used lots. What
I've
does
never
that
heard
mean?
of dysregulation.
So dysregulation, when you're dysregulated, basically it means your nervous system is out of balance.
Oh yeah.
Right? So it's essentially fight, flight, or freeze. Dysregulation exists on a spectrum, right? So you can be mildly dysregulated, which many people don't even notice it. Or you can be extremely dysregulated, which is sometimes referred to as being flooded. Basically you're just totally hijacked by your stress hormones and what have you. Regardless, when you're in a state of dysregulation, you have less access to your rational faculties. You're not thinking as rationally, and you're less connected to your empathy. And this makes sense if you think about it, like somebody who's dysregulated, when you're dysregulated, it's like you're a drowning person is not going to be engaging in a conversation about politics.
You're drowning in adrenaline.
You're drowning in, yeah, exactly. You're going to grab onto anything that floats and probably push other people down, right? So the thing that's really important to understand about this is that being in a dysregulated state, when we're in a dysregulated state, that drives how we relate to others and ourselves. It causes us to be more defensive, to be more reactive, to be less empathic, to be more sort of survival focused, more fear focused, where it's usually fear, anger. Those are the two of the most dysregulating emotions. And most people have no idea that they're dysregulated when they're dysregulated. Sometimes we call people who are chronically dysregulated a loose cannon. Is that the expression?
Yeah,
right?
That, yeah.
So somebody who's just triggered really easily. When you understand, so one practice that I really recommend that people commit to is to learning what I describe as your own dysregulation signature. What is it? Learning about, number one, learning to tune into yourself and look specifically for how regulated you are. A regulated person is a person who is able to engage in healthy relational dynamics fairly easily. A dysregulated person is not, right? And so dysregulation is also contagious. Dysregulated people dysregulate people. When you're around somebody who's dysregulated, you're more likely to get dysregulated. I mean, just imagine you're having your morning coffee and, you're reading your email in the morning or something.
Because, sometimes your kids, you will be unhinged from your kids, and then you'll come into a room and I'll say to you regularly, you're really stressed, you're just going to create more stress. You've got to sit down and sit in a dark room, and your reaction will be, go away. No, I'm not.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Yeah,
fair enough.
So yeah, so I really directly understand. Like, it's so easy for me to judge Steve because it's like me judging myself. You know, it's easier to me to judge him than myself, and I'm sure I've the same type of things, but different.
Yeah, but we all do it, right? And you can get it. You can get dysregulated from like reading an email that like you open up your email and it's all caps with exclamation points in the subject heading from one of your staff. I mean, whatever. Like you could go from regulated to dysregulated fairly quickly. And dysregulation is contagious. And so you look at like, you know, one of the causes of infighting among progressive people, for instance, or anybody probably is dysregulation. We get dysregulated. We look at the state of the world. You know, we're working to help animals and we see what's happening to the animals. We see these horrible videos. We get dysregulated. A lot of us have trauma around it, and then it's contagious. So one thing we can do, and you do not have to be an advocate or an animal advocate to know what dysregulation is or to need to work on it in yourself. We all need it. You just need to be human, right? So one thing I recommend that people do is they write down like a list of their symptoms of dysregulation. Like just keep a list of this. And like, what is it when you're dysregulated? Number one, I should say, is to pay attention, check in with yourself throughout the day and ask yourself, do I feel in balance? Do I feel in balance right now? And if not, okay, where do I feel it in my body? People experience dysregulation in different places and in different ways, and it's in your body, right?
Yeah,
so
I regularly feel like I'll feel like a little bit of reflux, or I'll feel my breath being short.
So that's
typically
perfect example.
My little kind of steam coming out of my ears, I'll feel like that there's a little bit of, my breath will be short, and I'll feel a little bit of like kind of almost like reflux.
That's a great example. So then when you feel that, you can say,
like, I got to sit in a room and breathe.
I'm dysregulated.
Yeah.
Like I'm feeling a little dysregulated. Okay. Like where does it show up for you? Dysregulation.
I'm more noticing overwhelm, that it's like, I just can't deal with this. And it'll be,
You feel that quite a bit.
I know, well, but I'd say dysregulation is so common at various degrees. Like,
Yes.
I'll even say it from every time I get in the sun, I think I'm relaxed, and then I come out of the sun, I'm like, oh my God, I must have been so unrelaxed or stressed because I feel so different after this 30 minutes sitting in this hot and going into the cold. So I think dysregulation, as you said, is on a spectrum, and we're in our society, we're fundamentally dysregulated as a society. And we're all on the spectrum somewhere. That when I think of when I'm relaxed and at ease, that is not like, that's some of the time, but it's certainly not the 90% of the time. It's more like the 10% of the time when I've probably gone through dysregulation and I've let go of everything, and I've reached this place of, I don't care, I just accept everything. And maybe that's where I'm in these moments of complete surrender, where I've just gone through the eye of the storm, and over the other side I'm in that space of regulated and
whatever
relaxed.
comes at me is grand.
I don't mind, sure, it's all grand, sure, whether it rains or snows or get run over, whatever.
But you can think about it. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned this because, you know, most people are dysregulated, you know, a lot of the time. It's a matter of degree. And you may not get into this perfect place of like total regulation, but you don't have to. But it really is useful to notice your dysregulation signature. Like, what does it look like? How does it show up? Because you can interrupt the process so that you don't end up flooded and overwhelmed, which is not good for you. And it's not good for your interactions, even if you can contain it. It's better to be regulated if you can be regulated, and to learn how to self-regulate. So what is it like? What if you can write down a list and just keep an ongoing list? What dysregulates me? And you probably will find that there are certain things that tend to dysregulate you, that are like, you'll say the same things over and over and over again. It's not like an infinite list of things. So you'll start to notice that, oh, these are my key dysregulators. When I'm dysregulated, how does it show up in my body? You know, because you can interrupt the process at any kind of point, right? So you can say like, oh, I know that like when I get decaf instead of caffeinated coffee when I've asked for it, that's really dysregulating for me. So, oh, I'm probably going to get dysregulated from this. Where does it show up in my body? And then you can also say, you know, what is the narrative? What is the story that I start telling myself when I'm dysregulated? And that's really important. And a lot of us have like a default story that we go back to, like, you know what, it's whatever I do, it's never going to be enough for anyone. Or I'm always the one that's giving, doing, but nobody gives to me. Oh, I knew I'd never be good enough. Or like, here they go again, taking advantage of me. Or I have all these good ideas, but like nobody cares to hear them. whatever it may be.
You
But
have a
usually-
story that will just read like the headline that'll just play out in our head in that moment. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and there are different types of stories, right? So, but there are kind of key stories, but it's really can be really interesting to notice what's my narrative, and maybe most important, what regulates me. And there are certain things that are regulating for all people, probably all beings in many ways, right? So being on the receiving end of healthy relational dynamics, it's always regular. When you're with somebody who's honoring your dignity, you really feel seen by them, you feel secure in their presence, that's regulating. But there are things that might be just specific to you, like what regulates you?
Lying on the ground, with my eyes closed and just breathing. Like that's, if I do that for a minute, I'm grand now.
So most people have no idea what regulates. They don't, well, they know, but they couldn't answer it that quickly. They'd have to really think about it, but that's great.
I need
Or
to
I'll say
lock
to you-
myself
You
in
have
a
that.
dark space and just
I'll say to you,
breathe.
Steve, you need to go find a dark room and sit there. Give me your phone. You're not taking your phone with you. Go sit in that dark room and come back to me in 5 minutes. And you'll go, no, I'm not. And it's like, you're acting like a Tasmanian devil, Steve.
No, I'm not.
Go into the hot room.
This is great. You can be like each other's dysregulation police.
Oh, we are all the time.
Yeah. Shawnee there will agree. He sits through the dysregulation police.
Push-ups.
That's a good one that we'll regularly. Do you want to go do push-ups or pull-ups? Like, and go and get go and get it out of you.
That's
Don't know if it's chasing it away or what it's doing.
no,
But
but
it-
it's regulating you.
yeah,
It's
it
getting
gives
you.
that
You're getting
energy.
you in your body, and it's
And allows us to express that energy. Like if you think adrenaline, it's a fight or flight or freeze. It's an
energetic-
action. You need to actively do something with this energy. So I find when I go up and do press ups or pull ups, I come back and I feel like
Or just have a fight. Like, sorry, that was just a joke.
fight each other. Well, but not everybody needs to be active, right? So some people who are listening, might need the opposite. They might have been too active and they're just so worked up and getting into their body more deeply might not even help them. It might be that they just need to be like, lying on the ground is not being terribly active, right? But they might
But it
just need to
feels-
lie
I
down
feel like
and
I'm being held, and I'm aware
Yeah.
that my nervous system is like, oh my God, it's actually, I can feel it slowing down, and I can feel my breath dropping, and I can feel everything going, oh, okay, it's all right. Like, and it's like even yesterday we were filming here, and in between I was just sitting down and kind of going, oof. I wasn't looking at my phone. I was just sitting down and just to get in the chair to feel me and breathing, and it was definitely helping momentarily regulate me.
Yeah, but this is great. I mean, that, like, your strategies. You might have multiple strategies. You might not always be able to do that, but for, just knowing what you need, knowing when it shows up in your body, using the term dysregulated as opposed to I'm stressed. So sometimes stressed is like so general for people, but I'm dysregulated. My nervous system's out of balance, can also
Brilliant.
just be really helpful, and also with the people in your life. And it's also a time, often when people are dysregulated, we feel, because we so want to get out of that state of mind, we feel like we have to take action and make a decision. I'm really dysregulated. I've got to make a decision now. Should I leave my relationship? This is not the
move.
time. I need to move. This is usually not the time to make big life decisions, right? And just give yourself permission. Like, I'm dysregulated, and I'm not going to make any major decisions right now. Or even for people just to be able to say, I know I'm dysregulated, therefore the narrative that I have, the story I'm telling myself in my mind is probably not accurate. It's going through this distorted lens. Like, so often when you're triggered or you're dysregulated, and then you have this story in your mind, like, oh my God, my relationship's never going to work. Or like, oh my God, this project that I worked on forever, it just sucks. It's never going to be. We tend to have catastrophic thinking when we're dysregulated, but simply knowing when you're dysregulated can help you say, like, okay, I'm not going to buy into this narrative right now. I will return to this conversation with myself when my nervous system is more balanced. And you give yourself permission to unhook from one of the things that's probably, most dysregulating to you.
It's amazing. For anyone listening that's gone, this is fascinating, dysregulation. Where would they learn more about it? Or where, like, do you have writings on it or blog posts or things, directions with people go, I want to learn more about this. This is brilliant.
Yeah, well, one thing that would be really great for people to learn more about is how to self-regulate, like specific things like breathing exercises and other types of exercises. So in our website, infighting.org, I have a section on dysregulation and
Brilliant.
everything that we've talked about. And I also refer to external links on that site. And one of them that's really good is Therapy in a Nutshell. And it's one woman, her mission is basically to make therapeutic tools that are like these essential therapeutic understanding and tools accessible to everybody.
Brilliant.
And so Therapy in a Nutshell is a website. It's also a YouTube channel. And she has a bunch of different videos on how to self-regulate. And you can also co-regulate. Co-regulating is the act of a person with it's the process of a person who has a regulated nervous system helping to regulate somebody else's nervous system. Usually what happens when we encounter somebody who's dysregulated, the dysregulated person brings everyone down. Like that's the lowest common denominator wins.
We all know it's
right?
so true.
But when you recognize, again, reframing like anger or stress or fear, just reframing it as dysregulation or being dysregulated, it makes it neutral. And it helps you identify what's happening on a very practical level. Like, oh, instead of like getting all like worked up when you encounter somebody who's dysregulated, if you can say, oh, this person seems, don't make yourself the expert on their experience, but this person seems like they may be dysregulated. Therefore, I'm going to do my best to stay in a place of regulation, and try to help to balance this dynamic. That could go a long way. And there are things you can do, like they've done studies on this, like making eye contact is actually regulating. Now, there's a caveat. I know for many people, certainly people who have certain types of neurodivergence or neurodiversity, people with ADHD, sometimes people on the autism spectrum, eye contact is actually uncomfortable. It's also cultural. So you have to be careful with that. Touch can be regulating. Again, you have to be careful because you have to know the person well enough to touch them and know you're not crossing their boundaries. Simply practicing this formula for healthy relating is regulating, right? Honoring somebody's dignity. Just think about your own experience, right? If you're in the presence of somebody, and whether you're dysregulated or not, but when you're in the presence of somebody and you truly sense that they honor your dignity, they think of you as a fundamentally worthy being. You do not feel judged in their eyes. You feel like they think of you as worthy. And you have a sense that you trust that they are going to practice compassion toward you and treat you with respect. Chances are you're much more likely to get into a regulated state. Just being around that. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah. This is amazing. Wow.
Because even like co-regulation, I think the most simple example for me is when a child is trying to tantrum, and your role as the parent is to help them regulate themselves, to help them bring their nervous system back into
accept
and
it's amazing. Yeah. Like my little, she's nearly 1 Fies, and when she's, having a little state of dysregulation, I will always hold her and stay calm. Oh, you're wonderful. I'm so sorry, my love. And it's like, it's those, and ultimately when we're older, we want maybe not to be literally held and,
not far off it.
But energetically, that's the kind of, probably the mirroring something similar energetically, what we're looking for, that kind of energetic imprint.
So true. I mean, in our generation, you remember there was this period where it was like, let them cry themselves, cry it out, leave it. They're having a tantrum, throw them in the corner, scream at them.
Yeah.
We have a lot we've had to overcome, but it's a perfect example with a child with a tantrum, and like you're teaching them that it's possible to go from dysregulation to regulation. And that is such an important, and you're demonstrating the process of regulation to them. And what an important life skill. Like imagine like if everybody learned how to self-regulate in this way, this is creating secure attachment as well. How do you secure attachment is being able to be secure and connected in attachments, what we've been talking about. So you're teaching them a really, really important life skill. And a lot of children don't learn how to self-regulate, and when they're dysregulated, their parents get dysregulated, and then it dysregulates them further.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening in the world at large.
Definitely, and not to blame parents. I mean, parenting is like, I can't even imagine. I mean, I can imagine. I was never a parent. I've never been a parent, but I was a full-time nanny for a number of years, helping raise other people's children. So I had some front lines experience. It was not easy, not even close.
Yeah.
And I got to go home at the end of the day.
Wow. This is fascinating. It really, really is. And I'm aware that we need to land this ship now. So I'd love to make it as practical as we can for people listening. So we've got infighting.org. Is that the...
Yeah, they can come to, so at my main website is Beyond Carnism. It's carnism.org, and that's lots of resources for people who are actually just in the vegan space. And that will link to all of these different sort of concepts we've talked about. And our newer website is called infighting.org. And that's about, how to reduce the friction between people who are working for a better world and everything that we've talked about, not everything, well, maybe everything we've talked about today is on that website with links to external resources as well. So taking care of your mind, learning how to self-regulate, effective communication strategies, and the steps, observations, thoughts, feelings, and needs, practicing healthy relational dynamics, honoring dignity, all of it, it's on that website.
Such a good reminder. Oof.
It really is. Like I'm left.
I feel like I need to be reminded.
Taught in school.
Well, I feel like I need to be reminded. Can you remind us this every hour on the hour? Just every hour on the bong. Okay. Yeah, great. Right. I remember. Jesus, fall back into those patterns.
Yeah, well, it's the default. I mean, that's the thing we have to keep. Sam Harris talks about waking up. You got to keep waking, keep re-waking up.
Oh my God, yeah, life is
totally
incredible. The amount of opportunities to wake up are immense, glorious. It's so generous with opportunities to wake
gratitude. I'm grateful for all these opportunities to wake up.
It all out. Beautiful.
Well, maybe one day if humanity makes it, the paths of least resistance, the paths that are the easiest to follow will be the paths that are the healthiest. Right now, it's the opposite. But that's why we've got to kind of,
the
forge
opportunities, aren't we so grateful? The amount of opportunities to evolve and wake up are just plentiful.
Yeah, we'll never run out of those. That's for sure.
Definitely not. Melanie, you're wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Always, this is the third time now, and it's always like at the time flies.
Yeah.
So you guys are amazing. I love what you're doing, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful this world has you.
Well, back at you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regulation and dysregulation. That's an amazing concept. Like I really haven't.
I really enjoyed that.
It's putting words on something. That's great. Putting words on things which like experiences which we love that you're listening to our podcast. Thank you so much. We really like to think of ourselves as plant-based cooking pioneers.
What you may not know is that we have our own recipe club, which contains hundreds of recipes designed by us. And for just $3.99 a month, you can be part of our recipe club.
Not just that, but you'll be part of our community, which means you can chat with us in the chat with other members and take part in our live events.
And ultimately, by supporting our recipe club and us, we can continue to get better guests and improve this podcast more and more.